Since it's 6 o'clock, we will officially call this Finance Committee meeting of the whole to order. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Mayor Miller.
Here.
Alderpersons Borneman.
Here.
McClanathan.
Here.
Alderperson Ross is absent. Parker.
Here.
Alderperson Busker is absent. Brashaw.
Here.
Mysick.
Here.
Burberry.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alderman McClanathan, it's your meeting.
Thank you. The next item that we have on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Alderman Parker. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Alderman Burberry. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is public comments. Nobody signed in. So the next item on the agenda is approval of minutes of the October 7, 2019 Financial Committee of the Whole meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Alderperson Brashaw, seconded by Alderman Parker. Is there any discussion regarding these minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Agenda number 7 is presentation of the general budget, TIF budget grants by City Manager Crow and Deputy City Manager Bucus.
So, I lost my voice. I had it at the football game, so hopefully I'll be calling on department heads on some of these questions. And we'll hopefully get through, and you see that I may have to steal the fire chief's water here.
This one's used, you might not want.
Well, I don't drink out of either one of mine either, so. All right, so this is the general budget, budget brief. So we're gonna go through that as well as TIF and talk about pensions. And I tried to capture some of the things that we had talked about at when we talked during our strategic planning. And one of the things that we talked about with staff is once we make adjustments, once we get the budget approved, any adjustments have to be directly related back to the budget. If we have to make adjustments next year in the budget, bring things forward, they have to be directly related to the strategic plan that the council approved. So, meeting the objectives.
And just kind of a housekeeping matter, since we've got a lot of slides that we're going through, what I'd suggest for council members, and I'm open to something different, why don't we, at the end of each slide, when you're done with the slide, then see if we got any questions, address that, and then go on to the next slide. Otherwise, we'll be interrupting you at various points. Does that work for everybody? Okay, Manager Crowe.
All right, so this is our general revenue coming in. One of the things that we've got an estimate that our EAV is going to be increasing about 3.4%. All of that EAV is going to be going into pensions, as is the increase in personal property replacement tax. Additionally, we are getting our estimates on, and we have in the word slide that we have after this, we've got an estimate of what our revenue is from our increase in electric and gas tax. Remember, 40% of that goes into general fund, 40% into pensions, and 20% into roads. 40% goes into general, 40% into pensions, and 20% into roads. And then this is the summary of the expenditures, which we'll get more in detail in the later slides. So this is the revenue, starting with the revenue slide. This is where we talked about, and you can see that this reflects the pension, the fact that we're going into the property taxes, increase in property tax. We did lower our overall rate last year because of the property tax estimate. The way we get that estimate is that is done by the county assessor. Ron gave us before he left that his anticipated increase is 3.4%, and we then calculated in the TIF, the amount that we take out for TIF, and the amount that we take out for the enterprise zone. The other unknown factor here is we're only supposed to be seeing last year's increase for those properties we annexed in was about 13,000. So we've also rolled that into here. So,
Manager Crowe.
yep.
On the prior page there, okay, thank you. That EAV projected increase, is that incorporated into these projections?
It is, along with the personal property replacement tax anticipated increase.
And furthermore, is that increase, I remember we were talking last year, let's say it was increasing 0.5% or something like that, or I forget what the number was, but then that was the overall increase, but then only some of that was covered in TIFs. So how are we handling
Well,
that?
for this revenue that we've seen, we've pulled the TIF and we pulled the enterprise zone
Perfect.
out of this increase.
Okay.
Manager Crowe. On the general fund, the first slide.
Go back.
Yeah. I just want to clarify, the projected 2019 revenues, is that from the entire calendar year?
No, the 2019 is strictly based upon the 8-month,
Okay,
where this is, you're seeing a 12-month. So that was the stub year. We refer to it as the stub year.
I just wanted to make sure of that, because obviously the numbers are
Quite a bit different.
quite different. Thank you.
Yep.
And going back to the revenue slide, looking about 3/4 of the way down, reimbursement for fire OT and police OT. I saw in 2019 we had some reimbursement for fire OT and police OT, but none projected for this year.
Well,
What is the,
Actually, we have fire projection is 9,230, and police OT is 12. Oops, sorry about that.
1,200.
1,200.
which, just a minute, go back to the revenue, the other slide. Thank you. On
You got your
here,
pointer, Randy?
yeah, on 01-00-342 and 343,
So, right there.
right, and you had the fiscal year 2019 actual.
Oh, I see, that's 0. Yep.
No, but before that, on the second column of figures, what is the source of that reimbursement, and is that something that was that a one-off thing, or is that something that we can't plan for?
It really is, correct me if I'm wrong, we get reimbursed for overtime when our guys are doing DUI. We're tasked by the state to provide assistance with DUIs or with traffic stops, the stops that we set up, the checkpoints. Is that correct, Matt?
We get the reimbursement for the sustained traffic enforcement. That's a grant that's put on by the Department of Transportation, where officers go out on Christmas, Labor Day, the major holidays, those times when we see an increased alcohol use in association with motor vehicle driving, that we get that.
And the fire reimbursement is if our guys have to, if they have to deploy from one of the task forces.
So is that something that we probably will be reimbursed for next year, but you don't know what it is?
We don't know what it is.
So conservatively, you're just leaving it 0, and what we get reimbursed for is just a bonus, if you will? Okay, all right. Then also a few lines down, the replacements tax, corporate, police pension, fire pension, that's the property replacement tax? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, all right,
Personal property replacement tax.
all right, thank you.
That, there's a rank order. They go to fire and police pensions first, and then if there's anything left over, if we've met our amount, then it goes to the library. And that was established by ordinance in 1975. Well, this is the comments in between the two slides. So EAV, we talked about, slight increase going to pensions. There's what our electric and natural gas increases are. We'll go to the next revenue slide. We are really, again, the liens are estimates out there because it depends what each year, how we're leaning and what we're doing. But you can see the revenues going up. I'll give Diane credit with that. She is the one that's really bird dogging the lien program. Hangar rent, we have seen a substantial increase in hangar rent since we brought the businesses in. I had a tough discussion with the flying club today that they said we want to meet and set up our goals. And I said, you know, really our goals are related around the two businesses that we have out there. And what they need is they have first priority, followed by our guys that rent the hangars, because they are the ones that are bringing the income into the city, is the two businesses. And once the road's finished, we have another business that has showed interest in actually building additional hangars out there. So, for their business. You see also the fuel sales is going up, which is good. From the airport, again, that's being driven. See a significant increase that's being driven by Heritage Aero out there. Just on a side note, the PD traffic fines, if we lose, so this gives you an impact. If we lose home rule, that figure goes to zero. Because then we have to write them all as state tickets.
Alderman Boardman?
I just want to clarify, you're talking about the $210,000 number?
Yeah.
Alderman Parker?
I don't understand, well, just because we lose home rule, why do we have to write them state tickets? And then we don't get a percentage of that state ticket?
Well, we get it back, so we don't know what that figure is. But they go away. When you lose home rule, one of the things, two things that are involved with the loss of home rule is you no longer can write city ordinance tickets, and also code enforcement goes away. We have to strictly, it is strictly written as state tickets. And so we have to go through the processing and treating them as state tickets.
Maybe you can answer, when did that change? My whole 30 years, we wrote ordinances, we did not have home rule.
No, the city has had home rule. Don, I disagree with you. The city has had home rule since the state allowed home rule, which is ever since it's been above 25,000.
You know, approximately how many years ago that was?
I would imagine it was when the 1970, when the Constitution was passed in Illinois, or the most recent Constitution, but I could be wrong about that.
Yep.
Never came up, so I apologize then.
You know, you're right. It never came up because when we put in, we were automatically home rule because we were a population in excess of 25,000. So you're right, it wouldn't have come up.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
Mr. Chair,
Alderperson Brescia.
thank you. Manager Crowe, that is a huge line item that would go away with if
Well,
we lost our home rule.
we would still get some of it, but the issue is the state gets their cut first, and then it has to be processed through the county versus us.
And leading on into that same line, will we lose any of these other revenue sources?
City ordinance fines.
What line item? Okay,
That's
sorry,
that.
35,000? Maybe this is off topic. I just would like to know if there were any other ones that would be affected.
Home rule sales tax drops down. Where is home rule sales tax?
Another page.
Which what? Three from the bottom, thank you. So right now, that we would lose maximum we can charge for sales, home rule sales tax. That goes away. The home rule sales tax goes away. What we have to do is then, there's still a 1% tax we can charge. We are charging over that right now, so a portion of that goes away. The municipal, the food and beverage tax, where there's a ruling by Rockford that actually dealing with food and beverage tax, whether we can keep it or not. And that's the other one that's in jeopardy as we go forward. The other thing is we're limited as to how much property tax we can to PTEL, which is a figure that's based upon, established every year by the state.
Mr. Chair.
Alderperson Brescia.
And my follow-up is just a statement regarding this. I'm not trying to be a naysayer or anything, but we do need to plan ahead and actually get the thought process going now in case that happens.
That's why we've been working on it, to reduce the budget.
Yep.
Yep, already. And that's why we're bringing on fleet leasing and all these other programs. So I just want to make sure that we bring it up. Did you have a question?
No.
No, thanks.
All right, more revenue?
Manager Crowe.
Yep.
Right at the bottom, transfer from Fund 32, was that the fire capital improvement, those fees, ambulance fees, things of that nature? And we get, that's the split percentage, I think it's like 58-42 or something like that,
It's
right?
54-46.
Okay. So that's what that transfer is?
That is correct.
And I don't recall when we changed it. I know we changed it with Chief Allen, and I don't remember where we were bringing it from. Was it like
So, last year, the council voted to increase fees for stretcher, for lift fees for car accidents, fires. There was one other, and then changed our overall fee structure for assessing it. And that was with the idea that we're going to start building for, number one, replacing the platform truck. As we go out, we have to pay for the bond, eventually bond out for that, because that's going to be between, depending on the type of truck, anywhere from 1.3 to 1.7 million. Is that a pretty good estimate, Chief? And then Adams Street Station, right now, our problem with Adams Street Station is it's going to be out there in the capital bill, and one of the discussions I've had with the two chiefs is, do we need to look at a combined new police station and fire station? Look, Adams Street Station is getting to the point where the fire trucks are too big to fit in the station as they're getting size. So we're going to have to eventually look at either expanding, doing an expansion, tearing that station down, building a new station on that site, or looking at another process, because our trucks don't fit in there anymore, or will not fit in there.
Is the administration comfortable with the percentages as it currently stands?
We are. Randy, I'll let you.
Yeah, we just lowered it a little bit those 2 years ago. So I mean, we're talking about $20,000-$30,000 difference.
Okay.
We're still doing some of the transfer in lieu of taxes, corporate, and that covers the bills for legal, to the corporate fund, and then library dispersing to the corporate fund. Again, covers HR and legal is what those transfers are for. All right, now the expenditures. So, elected officials and commissions. Basically, the liquor commission is the one commission that gets paid for their job, and city council does as well. This is fixed. You can change it, but it has to be fixed The only time you can change it has to be changed 6 months before the elections. City clerk. Here, this is, so this includes both the clerk and the deputy clerk. And Dovey gets an increase with her getting her certification. She's applied for that, and that's budgeted into this. And that was, again, by ordinance. This is established by ordinance.
Manager Crowe.
Yes.
Health insurance shows a substantial increase on that. Could, and then some of the other, the IMRF was about a 20% increase. I know, let me start with IMRF. I know IMRF required some additional contributions for us this year due to the last market. Was it around 20%? Because that's, I think, what I was consistently seeing throughout some of these departments. So that's one question. Then the first question is, what's the substantial jump for health insurance contributed to or attributed to?
With respect to IMRF, we're going from 6.2% to 8.4%. We had a 2.2% increase for 2020.
Okay.
Because of the down market in December of 2018. So there, we went from a surplus to a deficit in there. With respect to health insurance, overall health insurance is down slightly. It has been going down the last couple of years. Certain departments are up because of people that are either the policies that they're on. We've had some places that are not on our health insurance, but now they're on, or we're on single, or now on family. So that
This
individual circumstance.
This
right.
one went particular up because Rhea's husband is going to be on insurance, where Don was covered. The other thing is Don was covered under the, because her husband died on active duty, she was covered under that.
So we don't have to get into individual circumstances on each one as we're going through these departments as a whole. Each one of the health insurance adjustments is related to the individual circumstances, and the IMRF ones, which a lot of them looked around 20%, were related to the increased employer contributions. Is that a general rule for all of it? Okay, thanks.
Overall, our health insurance significantly dropped. Our dental went slightly up. So, as we, as we go forward, the one difference is the health insurance is a July renewal. So they recalculate it every July, but we're sitting on that board because I'm the representative from our sub-pool. Our sub-pool is still outperforming the pool as a whole. The other thing we had to do is we had to do a across-the-board audit of everybody. It's required that every 5 years, with IPBC, they do an audit. So they just do everybody's, and we're actually the first. I want to give Deborah. She was the first. We were the first person. We're the first member of IPBC to get ours in. We were recognized the last board meeting. But we did find that we had three people that came in and said, well, I'm going to pull some members off when we asked them, because they had to verify that they were actually really dependents. So just on a side note, so. Mayor, manager, the big thing here is this is where Kirsten's, part of hers is being paid. So the other thing is that Kirsten, portion of her salary is being picked up this year, starting, when does it, probably, Region 1's picking up a portion of it. Yeah. November 1st through the end of the census. As the census representative, it's $15 an hour of her for 20 hours a week is being paid, of her salary is being paid by Region 1. We are a subgroup. We're one of the only certified subcommittees, and that's due to the work that Kirsten's put in under Region 1 for the census. Us in Rockford, and she was called out for that, and she was noticed by the Census Bureau. And because of that, we're getting additional money towards her salary into this. Additionally, my salary is split between water and sewer, and as well as the general fund. I spend about half my time working water and sewer projects. So, thanks to all the work that we're getting done.
Alderman Burberry.
Manager Coe, just to clarify then, Kirsten's salary would show an offsetting revenue source under revenue someplace.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Manager Crowe, just because we've heard some questions in regards to that, could you refresh all of our memories in regards to the fellowship and then the initial breakdowns, because it wasn't there, like some of it covered by the fellowship, covered by the city, and then now we got this Region 1?
That's Region 1. So what we're doing is, portion of her salary will also be covered under the pre-disaster mitigation grant. Portion of it's being covered by the census grants, and then a portion of it is additionally paid through ICMA. We have to pick up all of her benefits, and we're getting split across three ways as we get into revenue.
And she's been working on pre-disaster mitigation grant a lot,
Yep.
also with community
Census.
developments and the census as well. So it's this fellowship program. Correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the main benefits of it is it gives these individuals in these good programs an opportunity to have hands-on experience in the field while they're still going through their program, and it gives obviously benefit to the city with the various areas that they're able to contribute in.
So Kirsten, before she got here, I can't even pronounce it, the Balderash, the award for being the top graduate out of NIU. And NIU is the #2 MPA program in the country, behind KU. There's some discussion whether KU or NIU is better. Kansas. And so we were fortunate to get her on. And then what we do is we negotiate the salary level with the fellow, and then that establishes everything else. And then as we work for the grants, that was always part of it. We would pay for a part of her salary out of the grants as well. And she's done incredible work. We've got 132 properties signed up where we were well below that. And the census, we're a leading community for the number of people that are signed up for the census. For workers, she's done that, as well as gotten the census subcommittee signed up. And that's all her. So, also included, we have not priced it out, but it's not in the budget. But one of the things that we talked about was a PR director. So when I went down to the national conference, I did some discussion with other communities, and rather than a PR director, a lot of them are calling him a communications director. Which, because of what they do. They handle, some of the things they would do is handle the press releases, it'd be centralized. Right now, the way we work it is each one of the departments submit them into Diane, and then I review them. Diane reviews them, and then I review them. They would coordinate and write and edit and design articles for the city's newsletter. I know we've gotten positive feedback on the newsletter, but we've also gotten feedback that it looks old. Well, it doesn't have the pizzazz, so bring in somebody that does that. News articles, what I know the mayor writes news articles, they would not be working on that. What I see is as our newspaper has gotten less and less focused, they are willing to take more and more articles written for them. And I see if we bring this person on board, we would additionally pick up some additional writing, to write about projects we're doing within the city. One of the things that we talked about is this person also be responsible when we get ready to do the ribbon groundbreaking for our new water treatment facility. They would write the article, set up the groundbreaking ceremony, and get that going. Also, with all of our natural disasters right now, I am the PIO for the city when those natural disasters go on. So this person would take over that, and they would coordinate through the two PIOs that both the fire and the police, and coordinate with them going forward. A person would constantly monitor and maintain both on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, assist with FOIA requests. So when Dovey gets in their FOIAs, she sends out the FOIAs to all of the departments. They research, they have to get their data together. You know, an example is when my emails got FOIA'd, I had to, between Kurt and I, we probably put eight hours worth of work. Actually, you put in 36 hours worth of work to get those FOIA emails. Well, you average 1,000 emails a week, and I have to maintain all of them. Kurt does a lot of searching if we get a big area. We already have a desk we can use for them, and they would coordinate with the Greater Freeport Partnership to sell it. Now that's what we have. And when we talked about a new communications director, here's when we talk about sunk costs. So this is based on a 44. So what you know, what I've been doing is having Deborah and our intern go out to all like communities of similar size and kind of getting an estimate. We're actually 47,000, maybe a little light based upon the feedback we're getting. It's probably more in the range of 50,000 to 52,000, depending on what we're looking at. Rochelle pays theirs 65,000, but they also take up the position of deputy clerk, and we already have a deputy clerk. That's my phone talking to me, huh?
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear. Could you please repeat what you said?
It's on the side.
He thinks it's an alderman.
So this, but I had Randy do the quick numbers based upon a salary of 47,000. And where that salary came from was discussions with what the public school district is paying their PR person. So Rochelle, like I said, Carbondale is paying theirs 52,000. Rochelle is also, but they're also their tourism director. They don't have a CVB, so they're paying theirs to do both tourism and also, as well as the deputy clerk position. So it kind of gives you a range. And we have job descriptions. We have job descriptions from 17 different communities right now in the state of Illinois. What you do is you look at, what I found out is that most communities in the area of 17,000 or 15 to 17,000 and larger are going to a communications director because everybody is now communicating on Facebook. And that's the biggest thing that I heard at the conference. The print media is becoming McPaper with a central, for us, we're lucky, Rockford, Galesburg, they just shut their paper down altogether. Rockford's providing us, and if you don't know, we only have one reporter, and she's not really a reporter, Jane, in the city. They've moved everybody else back to Rockford. And one of the things you find that the communications director will is, I've tried to establish those relationships, but they assign any reporter they can that doesn't necessarily, and we saw that with, when it was announced that we didn't even know, they didn't reach out to Matt or I when we announced that he was going to be the interim director and asked us for a quote. The interim police chief. So this is, are there any questions on this? And I know this addresses one of the strategic plan issues. And Randy, we did not put it in the budget yet because we wanted to get feedback from the council.
Alderman Boardman.
Thank you. So I have a handful of questions here, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
The list here you have on the previous slide, you have 7 enumerated kind of responsibilities. Obviously, that's not a finite list of the responsibilities. So they would do much more than just these things.
Right. This was an idea of just so you could get an idea of what we were thinking as we've gotten more and more job descriptions. We're going to be able to frame that You know, it's, as to what they're gonna do and how they're gonna operate. They would work, directly, for the city manager.
So for these things right now, whose responsibility is it to get these things done currently? Yourself? This would allow you to focus on,
City
Other
management
things.
stuff.
right, so you'd be able to manage the day-to-day, which is what your contract is for, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Following up on that, I mean, are these types of duties ones that your colleagues are normally supposed to be handling?
No.
You're supposed to be handling?
No.
All right, please continue.
Thank you. And then that's kind of to my point. So you mentioned Carbondale and Rochelle. You mentioned them because they're kind of a similar situation as Freeport, or size-wise, or?
They're the ones I can remember off the top of my head of the 17. I mentioned them because Carbondale's roughly the same size as we are. I realize they have a college. Rochelle Rochelle is actually smaller than us, but they're kind of the basis being used as the example on what they can do. They have really got a good PR campaign to the point where their city manager on a weekly basis does a Facebook Live where people submit questions ahead of time and do an online town hall on Facebook. And they also, when they had flooding, they went out, the communications director went out and with the city manager and the fire chief and the police chief and went to their different sites. And they actually have they produced an interesting, I know Randy and I have seen an interesting video to sell the city where, and the police, to compete, sell the police force. Their city manager acted as a burglar for stealing donuts, and they went to each one of the key locations with all the police chasing them around the city.
Now, if I could have a couple more follow-ups here. Thank you. With regards to these things you're mentioning, kind of selling the city, I think maybe the public would probably say, well, what are we paying the GFP for? So can you distinguish between the need for this versus what we're doing, what the GFP is accomplishing?
So the GFP is more focusing on selling it as a tourism. This is selling what we're doing within the city and what we're doing to I would put this closer to some of the things that Collaborate Freeport used to do about, working with attitudes and selling why that what we are doing and really selling what the city government is doing to improve people's day-to-day lives.
And this would be another kind of medium for the city to, I guess, to obviously communicate, but facilitate transparency as well.
That's right. That's the whole idea here. That was the whole concept behind the newsletter, is to develop more ways to communicate with people. And we've seen it, so we've even seen it in the garbage contract, some things that we've learned from communications. We have people that when we have with the garbage contracts, as we went forward, said, well, I don't get the newspaper, I don't listen to the radio, I don't see your newsletter, and I don't watch TV. So we got to find ways to communicate with them as well.
And finally, why not contract this out versus take on an employee that has these additional sunk costs in addition to salary?
Well, we initially looked at contracting it out, and we actually tried that for about 6 weeks. What we found was we had issues with control of content, and that the contractor at times wanted to put their own spin on things and not really present the product, and we didn't feel we had as much control over what the product was that was being put out on the streets. I know the mayor was involved in some of the newsletter and some of the issues we had with the initial, we initially tried the contractor back in, when was it? Back in February, when we initially started up the newsletter. And the formats, when I said the mayor, I bounced ideas off of her for the newsletter, so, and that, as we went forward.
And then just lastly, is it part of your presentation to kind of give an example or suggestion
give an
where
answer.
where the funds would come from for this position? Is that something you haven't gotten to yet? Or?
We haven't, that'll be the next step as we look at it. We want to know, because this was one of the things you talked about in the strategic plan. We wanted to move this forward. We need to get it into this budget, but we want everybody to be aware of what it is. So as we talk about personnel, as you know, we can no longer talk about personnel in closed session. So we have to do this, and this is an opportunity to talk about this. So we can budget this with the idea that we bring somebody on by the beginning of the first of the year, if that's the desires of council.
And I'm assuming money would be moved from one area to another. This isn't just an additional amount that we need to come up with?
Well, one of our proposals as we go forward is we would require a change in ordinance, but it would be taking a portion of, we're allowed to use hotel motel tax to do this. Right now, all of the hotel motel tax is going to the Greater Freeport Partnership. We would hold back, Randy and I had talked about between 50 and 60,000, and we would look at where the budget in the TIF funds, because it's a combination of TIF and hotel motel tax as we go forward. That's one of the proposals that we have for you as we go forward with that. That is an authorized expenditure for hotel motel tax.
Alderman Parker?
Yes, thank you. No argument you're overworked. Everybody here is. But I also know that what your newsletter put out about the cuts that will be required if we lose home rule, which is pretty obvious we're talking about maybe laying off 10 police officers, closing a fire station, and we talked about the other thing that's going to be a cut tonight if we lose home rule on the fines. But yet we want to add $77,000, $76,000 to a budget that 1 year prior to the census coming out. I just really, it's hard. We all work hard, whatever we choose to do, but I'm totally against this, so thank you.
Well, let me clarify this. This is a request that I had from the council. This is not mine. So that came out of the strategic plan to look at where we're going for communications. So I don't, and let me make it clear, I don't have a dog in this fight.
Well, I'm just,
So it's,
You're saying this is one option.
this is one option.
Other aldermen on this? Okay. Alderman Burberry.
Well, I've been a proponent since I was appointed to the board last December of the need to sell the sizzle. I've used that term. I also realize the fiscal responsibility and where the funds are going to come from. But I think just listening tonight about the development of the new budget, there are many things in here that are in the world of news, a story that could be told. How much of our revenue has to go to pensions? Nobody knows that. You get asked that every day or periodically. It was news to me when I joined. There are a lot of other positive things in this budget and more to talk about tonight that have not been told. And the point of a communications director, PR director, whatever you want to call that person, him or her, they can take that news, they can take that information and turn it into a story that can be shared. Even if there isn't a newspaper full-time, you can still get the story out to other media, to whatever media are available to you. So from that standpoint, it's very positive. It needs to be seriously evaluated. I would be a proponent of it based on the overall budget. I agree with Alderman Parker. We need to look at the budget and see what's going to be there.
Alderman Weissig?
So I've also had some discussion on this topic, and I do also personally feel that there would be a benefit to the city to have this role filled. And you look at where some of the opportunities are, when we're doing a large construction project, or we're in the middle of setting budget, or there's so many details of items and ways to get out and even take pictures of a project, or take the time to really sell the story. And I see where the PR side of it really can have an effect. It actually builds energy in the community instead of something that's happening and people feel uninformed about it, then they tend to shut down. And this gives the opportunity to really lay things out, to have a role that is specifically for that purpose. And I think it helps the transparency side, and I think it really can help within the city to have that positive energy really coming out of it. And I would trust Manager Crow to direct in the right areas of what to share, and the things he'd love to take the time to do that I don't know would be done otherwise. Now, when we look at setting budget, and obviously with the challenges of losing home rule, it does need to be revisited, but I do support it in this budget for this year. Thank you.
Alderman McClanathan.
Mayor.
Yeah, I totally agree, Alderman Misick. And Lowell, I really appreciate your analogy of the GFP's tourism versus the city's role in it being, what are we doing to improve the quality of life here in Freeport? And that's the problem. We're not getting that word out there, even though we're doing a tremendous amount of things, but people don't realize it. So if we're really concerned about home rule, which I believe everyone is, we really got to get ahead of that game to sell what we're doing, because honestly, if the home rule has to go to referendum, the first initial thing that all of the voters will think is no, because they're thinking monies, and that it's just a human response to check a no on anything to do with referendums. That's why we have to get ahead of that in order to be able to sell it in advance, because if we try to sell it at the last minute, I'm afraid we're going to lose. And so in the long run, we want to keep home rule. So if we're looking at 40,000, 50,000, 60, whatever that is, it's a small piece compared to what the whole home rule package is. And then how it comes about in the budget, I have complete confidence of how wherever you want to take that from, that we can pull it. And if it needs to be thought through more of, like what Alderman Bermeray said with, subcontracting or whatever, maybe those are things that we can think about. But I'm totally in favor of having this position created.
Manager Crow, there was a large consensus, and one component of it is well, I mean, it's really kind of getting information and communicating to the public. I mean, one aspect is of, hey, here's what's going on in the city, but another aspect of it is we've seen some steps on it, like for some of the GIS. I'll say use the GIS maps, as long as we get everything right on it. But that's all right. It's trial and error, and I love that you guys are pushing out new product. That's great. But in today's era, the more information that's out there for the public as to what's going on, what's upcoming, what are some of the challenges, what are the projects being done, all that stuff. I think the better informed the public can be, the better decisions the public makes too, also in regards to that. So, and I think we all kind of talked about that, some version of that of the strategic plan. I would ask, since we're talking about this, if you could flesh this out a little more. We're gonna have some more budget meetings.
Right.
If you could flesh out this concept and also talk to us a bit more about what are some of the alternatives. If not this, then what? Then what are some of the ways we can do it? I mean, just think outside the box a bit, so we can kind of maybe weigh some of those other options too.
And so one of the things the council, I know we have a couple young council members in here. The concept of printed media is going away. So we need to be, that's why more and more communities are going to this kind of communications director, because even Facebook is considered a generational thing. It's for my generation. It's not for.
It's true.
Not for community development directors' generation or Alderman Borneman's generation. You know, that, things like TikTok and, Instagram are becoming the big things, so.
So I guess what I just say is if you could bring us, spend some
Yeah.
more time on this part too, as
Yep.
we go forward.
We will.
And one last thing I guess I do want to say on that is I don't think it's fair. The type of stuff that we're talking about is very city specific. I don't think it's fair to task GFP with that, with what their mission is, with what we've tasked them with. That there's a bit of a disconnect. There might be a little bit of overlap, but there's so much that's on both ends wouldn't be met if we're just saying, hey, GFP, do that, so.
You want me to add something? I just wanted to take the opportunity from an emergency response perspective to understand that in the event of a major emergency in the city, one of the most critical things that we could have in place is a crisis communications director, someone who can deal with that crisis communication. Lowell, myself, the police chief will all be engaged in critical decision-making in dealing with the emergency, and our attention shouldn't be on that message. That crisis communicators should be gathering the appropriate facts, helping us form our message, running it by the council and the city manager, and then Lowell as the incident commander would then approve its production to the public. The success of any community and its resiliency post-disaster has a lot to do with that crisis communications. And if we contract that out, we're subject to their availability. We're subject to, you know, all of the other contracts that they have to deal with. And so if we have someone that is part of our management team who is engaged in the day-to-day decision-making and operations, they develop a rapport with our team, and then they can get our message out there. So from my perspective as the chief of the department, it would also assist me in doing the work that I need to do in getting our message out in the event of a disaster. So that crisis communication piece is very important and would be right on with this.
Alderman Parker.
Even though I was against it, I do want to thank you for the thorough information you give us and how much you've looked into it. And with the fire chief, and I'm sure with the police chief, it's probably a very good situation when it's really hitting the fan. So look at California right now. They definitely need help. So I want to thank you for bringing it out as thoroughly as you have.
Alderman Borneman.
Thank you. And this is more of just a comment and a thought for the council and the listening public. Can you think of a organization or some type of company with a $20 million budget in 2019 that doesn't dedicate some funds to communications or some type of public relations outside? I know GFP does its thing and they're good at what they do, but they're not specific to us.
And not to correct you, but our total budget's about 47 million.
Sorry, I'm looking at the numbers here.
That's strictly the
General fund. So thank you for strengthening my point. A $47 million budget without any funds directed specifically to communications, especially with our purpose as a government is to serve the people, so to better communicate with the public. So that's just something to think about, and I appreciate you putting this together, and I'm looking forward to see what else, recommendations going forward.
So now we're into the other departments. Finance. So this is your three-person staff. Some of that finance money is also taken out, water and sewers transferred. Some of their budgets are paid out of finance. And as you remember, we did away with the treasurer's position. We increased the finance director's position because that picked up the role and responsibility of the treasurer. But it was offset, the overall savings about $27,000. Legal, we're in contract negotiations, so we're seeing it play out, expenditures. And this year, we have seen legal fees, outside legal, go up because of some of the contract negotiations. And we've put additional, because we're bringing in a consultant to help us with preparing for possible arbitration. Buildings, this is the building maintenance repair. So we don't lose this facility much as we lost Old City Hall. We are putting money into this. Built into this is the capital outlay. If you were here inside this building the day of the polar vortex, Diane was in a sweatshirt, coat, and gloves typing. This building didn't get above 45 degrees. And it's because one of the things we looked at, one of the things that wasn't done is we do not have storm windows on this. So the capital outlay here is to put storm windows in this building.
Manager Crowe, thanks for answering that. The other thing I had is, just out of curiosity, why are we flipping the first two lines? It almost looks like, you know, in 2019 fiscal year actual, the contracted building repair and maintenance was like 58,000, and it's down to like nothing, and then contracted equipment repairs is, it looks like the main. Is that just a budgeting maneuver? Or?
No, last year we had to tuck point the building. We had a lot of problems through the first 18 months of this building with flooding and leaks in the building. So we knew we had to go out and tuck point it. We had to do some membrane repair on the roof. So now we're in what we've done is we've contracted out maintenance. The council's approved the maintenance and for general maintenance. And that's why the swap between the two of them, because we've now gone to a maintenance contract. We actually have a maintenance person that is part of our cleaning contract that comes in and does general maintenance in the building, maintaining it. We have all our equipment maintained. Lesher comes in and restarts our HVACs and systems, and Honeywell does some additional work for us in maintaining as well as the elevator.
And this is covering all of our buildings, not just this building?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
We incorporated all the contracts. That's one of the reasons why we've gone to a common cleaning contract between us and the police department. We bid them out together as a single contract.
Chair,
Alderperson Brescia.
thank you. Manager Crowe, which line item is for the storm windows?
Capital outlay, 01-42-700.
25,000?
Yeah, 25,000. That was the estimate that we got.
And I just wanted to comment, when I was in the back talking to Kurt, it's freezing by those windows. You can just feel the cold air coming through, and we're not even in a vortex yet.
Yeah, so this building gets cold. So the heaters that were put into this building were not designed to go if the building temperature got below 20 degrees. Which, of course, it never does in the state, in northern Illinois. So, airport, we talked in detail about the airport. The airport is not yet profitable, but we're moving in that direction. And Randy, I will give Randy credit here. He is really, he and Daryl go through this with a fine-tooth comb on the expenditures. The big expenditures we have coming up and I will be getting the ALP for approval, the airport layout plan for those that are new. The first week in December will be on the council agenda. We went down. The big thing is the next thing up is the repair of the fence along the airport, and that'll be in there. And reminder that 95% of any repair to the airport is paid through grants and reimbursements from the state. We're, with the road completion, the septic field completion, and then the new electric system put in. The next is the fencing. A couple years down, it'll be resurfacing some of the runways, but that's the big expenditure next year.
Manager Crowe.
Yep.
Airport management, I had about a $7,500 increase.
Yeah, that's based upon the contract that we negotiated with Daryl.
And equipment rentals, it looks like a significant drop in regards to equipment rentals. Do we have any information from Daryl on that?
Well, the reason is as part of his contract, so up until we did the contract, we were renting the fuel truck. It's now his responsibility to rent the fuel truck.
And IT director had previously gone through and looked at the telephones and had disconnected some lines and things of that nature. Did we include the airport in part of that analysis?
I don't think we've. I can tell you the
Come on up.
airport, we did put all the lighting in, the LED lighting has all gone into the airport.
Geographically where it's at, we can't really do much with what they have going on.
Okay.
One of the things we did talk with is, I know the veto session's going on right now. There is $140 million that is set aside for capital plan. And one of the things that they said that they would authorize is us to run land fiber out to the airport, which is what all of our businesses would do. Because it would promote, because we have Heritage Aero out there, and they would pay for that under the capital plan. But that'll come, it may change under the veto session. All right. Streets, our favorite topic. This is strictly the running of the street department. This has the increase for ASME under the budget. Big thing was, as you can see, last year in fiscal year 2019, overtime was because of all the snowfall. You know, and why I bring that up is we're projected to have our very first major snowfall, Halloween. Projection of 3 to 6 inches, so which will hurt us both for leaf pickup as well as snow removal. No, so.
Manager Crow, with the comments in regards to obviously building and maintenance and making sure that we're taking care of our buildings along the way, I certainly appreciate and applaud that, and we've talked about that for a couple of years, making sure that we're still doing that. With that said, what was the cause? I'm looking at the middle, about 2/3 down, the contracted building, contracted vehicle, contracted equipment, contracted infrastructure. Looks like across the board there are some significant increases in that. What can that be attributed to?
Before I turn it over to him to talk about the contract and maintenance, there was a long-term contract that was signed before either Dennis or I were here for rug maintenance.
Airmark.
For Airmark, there was which expires next year?
Yes, it expires next year.
And it was signed by Tom Dole and Mayor Getz. And it cleans 27 rugs?
Yes.
And so we're seeing up. Contractor vehicle maintenance, it's strictly, we've seen, because our vehicle fleet, our large vehicle fleet we've got some major issues with it. And so we're in the process, like right now, we're replacing a turbo on one of the trucks. We've had a full engine rebuild. Do you want to add anything to that?
That line item for vehicle repair and maintenance also has the 2 bed lifts that rusted out. As for the building repair and maintenance, I believe that has the new fuel pump in there.
Yep.
If I had to venture a guess on that.
Our gas pump is on its last legs.
Yeah, I'm
out there.
talking about that. Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Busker.
talking about that with the replacing a fuel pump, have we looked into like doing a fleet fuel card program and outsourcing the fuel?
It's one of the things we're having our discussions with It's one of the things that Enterprise has proposed to us in the past. And they're meeting with us here this week to review do our yearly review so we can have that discussion with them. We still need to, because we also provide fuel for the police cars, fire trucks, and the large vehicles, which are not under their leasing program. But so we would have to see how that would roll into us as well. Thank you. All right. Continue on with street budget. Diesel and gasoline, that's an estimate based upon, we've been very fortunate over the last 2 years. 3 years ago when gas, or 4 years ago when gas was running $4, you saw every municipality in the state blow through its gas budget. One of the other things we've been discussing is buying gas. Both Randy and I, in our previous communities, basically bought gas way ahead of time. And you pick the right time to buy the gas. Basically, so it's one of the things we've had a discussion about that we may want to look at doing depending on how the gas, but with the gas being down as it is, it doesn't make sense, but that protects you if you think you're going to see increases. I used to buy it 9 months out.
Alderman Borneman.
Just curious, what line item does the salt come from?
That's under MFT, right?
That is the snow removal supplies.
Oh, snow removal, okay.
That's what I thought.
My mistake. That's why I have the department heads here, get me corrected.
And Rock and Road, what does that consist of?
That is every time we do an inlet, or that's kind of our catch-all for any road work that we do that's not asphalt or patching. Both asphalt and patching are under MFT dollars.
Cemetery. A big cost here is, of course, personnel. And we do have to replace the roof out at the cemetery building. And so, can't remember, that's why you see a big jump in building supplies. He's actually gonna do it himself. He's gonna re-roof there, the cemetery building.
Chair,
Go ahead.
can you clarify who is going to do this?
Our cemetery caretaker, his name's Justin Veer.
Thank you.
And what accounts for the temporary non-bargaining line?
Temporary, those are your, the temporary non-bargaining are the guys that do your grass cutting during the summer. And we hired one person for downtown this year. And then worked through a program through the Boys Club and Girls Club to additionally, because we found that what we were doing was we were pulling our guys off of patching the streets to maintain the downtown. We're not sure if the Boys Club and Girls Club, we're gonna redo that program again, but we are gonna try and keep one or two people downtown to help maintain it, as well as the cemeteries, the other place. Then they pull them off to do other mowing in city properties. They also mow the art museum. The one thing you get with mowing, city mowers, is, it's the old adage that, John Deere says, it's not how fast you mow, it's how well you mow fast. Well, no, for our guys, it's how fast they mow. Forestry, the big thing here with forestry, we're actually going to roll over. So the bid came in way over what we anticipated. So we want to roll that money on So this line item's actually gonna increase. But this is some of the new MFT money to address the ash trees. And why, you may ask the question, why are we addressing the ash trees through MFT? Well, we did a figure. For every ash tree that comes down, we're spending about between $5,000 and $7,000 in insurance money. We have a $5,000 deductible on our liability, so that $5,000 comes out of our budget. This last year, we spent $60,000 for ash trees coming down on cars. So with the new motor fuel tax, if we can get talking with Dennis and also with Pat Ingram, who is the head of forestry, they feel that if they can get 200 trees down, they can get ahead of the 540, and we can contract that out. 60 of those trees are coming down through ComEd right now, so approximately. So that would get us to the point where we have over half the trees down, the ash trees down. And that's one of the reasons why we're having problems trimming other trees and other bushes that I know the aldermen have talked to us about, is because we have to focus on ash trees, because ash trees are a liability to us. Our insurance company is because we've identified all of the ash trees in the city, they now view that as a liability.
Alderman Borneman.
Manager Crowe, if you could just kind of walk me through, first off, how many employees are in the forestry department?
3 or 2. Sorry, I got corrected. We pulled one guy's from over from the other side, so.
Full-time?
Full-time.
So, and then the ash tree, what's the count there that we have that aren't being taken care of by ComEd?
Well, they have 60, we had 540 that were identified by our intern this summer. And they're taking 68 or 66 down?
66.
And then we have this line item that obviously has jumped exponentially to 110,000. That money, you said, is coming from the motor fuel
That's correct.
tax, which the legislature of the state has allowed for municipalities in our situation to
You have to be within the ash tree
Quarantine area.
which we are, to use motor fuel tax to do it.
When we went out for bid, we had 100,000 that we were targeting. A little bit now we're talking 110. Are we going to be getting additional trees in that, or are you just adding that to reflect kind of what you think?
Well, we maintain 10,000 in this line because there are some trees that are too big. We can't take down, so we maintain. So that's the other problem we're having with the ash trees. We can't take down any tree over 60. Is it 60 feet?
Yeah, that's pretty much it for us.
I have one more question. The bid, 110,000, how many trees was that for? That was for 67 trees only?
66 or 67 trees. It came in 190,000. So that's why we're gonna reject the bid. The reason is we did it, so when we put out the bid, made them have to have all the stumps ground and the trees removed and be reseeded by the end of November. We believe that we only got one bid, and we believe that we got one bid because we put it out close to the end of the season. So when we talk to people about our recommendation is rolling that money over and bid it out very early in the year so they have all summer to take them down.
When you said remove stumps and everything, is that something when the city takes down trees, do we do that as well?
We get back to removing the stumps when we have time.
Okay.
Because, so, if it's not a nuisance, not causing a problem, then we go back and grind them out. Or we hire it out. We have to rent, correct, we have to rent the stump grinder, or we have a stump grinder.
We do have a stump grinder.
Yeah.
Chair.
Alderperson Brescia.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, you mentioned that we will save on insurance. Is that liability that we pay per tree at this time?
Yes. So every time a tree comes down, each individual person that files with us, for each car that comes down or each house that is damaged, they file individually, and we have to pay those claims individually,
Per tree?
per tree.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
How much is that approximately per tree, if you had to say, give us?
Well, we run anywhere from $3,000 to $12,000, and $5,000 of it is what we have to cover out of our insurance policy.
Wow. One more follow-up?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm really excited to hear that more will come down through these MFT funds, and I realize we still have so many to do. When you mentioned the stumps are contracted and sometimes, and that we have a stump grinder and we do some of them, is there any way to expedite that a little bit? I do have complaints about stumps as well as
Same,
trees.
so we have a choice. We have a choice. Do we take down trees or do we grind stumps?
Right, I get that. Thank you.
Yeah, yes is the answer to that, but when it comes to the bid for services, and if we didn't include the stump grinding process in the bid, would we get better value, more trees down?
We could talk about it. I'll let Dennis to address that.
Yes, if we don't take the stump out and we don't force them to reseed in that area, we can limit it to then a contractor, not a contractor and a subcontractor. So the price would come down quite a bit. It might come down a couple $100 a tree. So in the grand scheme of things, it might get you another 8 trees maybe.
What are our options, if we can talk in regards to this? I mean, you're looking at the amount of money that we're talking about, you're looking at the amount of money. What are the other duties that forestry covers outside of just the trees?
So forestry, do you want to take us?
I can take this.
They do a lot of things.
So forestry, anytime there's a light blinking, signal light out, traffic signal stuff, our forestry, they're the ones that have the bucket trucks, so they're the ones that would go for that. They're also the ones that are the most effective of us for electricians when it comes to that kind of stuff. So they are the ones that have to maintain all of our signal heads and all of our pedestrian signal stuff. Anytime there's a sidewalk program, anytime we have to go pull a sidewalk as part of the city's match of that, it's the forestry unit with the grapple truck that goes and does that. Anytime there's storm damage, they have to go and pick up the storm damage with the grapple truck. Anytime there's community development comes in with any kind of a work order that requires something to get picked up, it's forestry that goes with the grapple truck. They also snowplow, they also leaf pickup. They also set up all the flags. They do all the Christmas lights. They check all the Christmas lights. So they really do, anytime we have a street light out, anytime we have to do any kind of wiring with ComEd. So, I mean, they are really a jack of all trades, and the more we can pull them away from that, the more maybe we can get them to tree trim too, so.
Is there a reason that it's a separate department or run? We got, our forestry page separate from some of the other aspects that are under your oversight?
Well, one of the reasons is that forestry, when we deal with liability insurance, your forestry department, your forestry section is even higher liability for liability insurance than your firefighters are.
Well, would there be a benefits down, I'm not asking this to be solved this year, I'll put that out front, but would there be a benefit, all those other duties that you have on here that are wouldn't expose you to that liability, would there be a benefit to changing removing that one portion of the duties and contracting that out and reducing your liability?
You mean talking about contracting the forestry section?
The tree portion, yeah.
So anytime they get in the bucket truck, that's where the liability comes in. There are ways to reduce it. We've looked at it. There are new tools that are being used to reduce liability. There's a machine, it's called what's the heifer?
That's a brand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a grapple saw. The Heifer is just a brand.
But that particular that particular truck is a single-use truck and runs about $420,000. It's produced in the Netherlands and Sweden. But we looked at that. When you talk about, the other problem is we tried to negotiate this out. Contracting has to be approved. Outsourcing contracting under the ASME contract has to be approved by ASME. And we tried to negotiate that out, but was,
Sure. Just something practical we'll continue to look at down the road.
yep. There are municipalities that have done away with their forestry departments. So we talked about this, budget and tree removal. Community development, the big thing to remember on community development is there's $45,000 that is set aside to pay the remainder of the outstanding bill for our comp plan, which is supposed to be briefed out to council February, March timeframe. That's,
And where's that accounted for? Is that in the other technical services and other professional
Yes.
administrating consulting services?
yes. So comp plan, police budget. So we're now gonna get into our two largest budgets. Police budget, accounts for, I'll roll over to the side and then get back to 39% of your budget is police. So, and this is not equipment, not your police cars, which are on the capital bill budget. As you can see, the big, which we've got to get, our concern here, and you should be focused on it, is we know we have at least 4 officers. We have one that is moving on to a system. We have another 4 that are testing. We are just now at the point where we have 48 officers. We have, 1 or 2 that are currently out due to injury? Two. So that drives our overtime. Additionally, we're down, I just authorized the hiring of another dispatcher. It'll probably be 12 to 16 weeks before they're trained and up ready to go, which drives that overtime. So really manpower with both fire and police drives overtime. And it's the patrol officers. So Matt does, and we talked later about, I've already sat down with Ian, I've talked about the structuring. You asked what to do, a good look at what way we're doing the department, and everything, we'll be doing that this next year as we go forward, as what the structure should be.
Manager Crowe, or Chief, were you about to say something on that? Or I didn't want to interrupt either one of you. Okay. Manager Crowe, so the assumption is, at least the budget assumption on this is Manning would remain as it is under this assumption.
That's correct.
Okay, pending any review and things of
Right.
that nature. Well, when I see the almost $100,000 increase between the 2019 actual and the proposed 2020 budget, is that due to, at any given time, you're having people leaving, coming, hiring, and things of that nature? Is that $2,427,400 on line 3 there? Is that what it would look like if we were at, I'll say 48, but I know not all the 48 is accounted for, but is that looking like at a full figure for a full year of staffing? Is that why it's about 100,000 different?
Yes.
Okay. I just note, obviously, a significant increase of about $540,000 dollars for our pensions. I'll talk about that a little more later, but I mean, just noting it for anybody looking at why is the disparity in the budget, it's a significant increase. Contracted building repair and maintenance, we're adding about 10,000 on that. What are we anticipating doing with that? That's about 3/4 of the way down line 1-51-541.
There is a little I don't have an exact number on the fire panel that needs to go in the, there's 25,000 in capital. I don't have that exact number that needs to go on there.
So our fire panel, so if any of you were there for Chief Barklow's retirement, the fire alarms kept going off. Our fire panel is beyond,
Shot.
it is shot and it's beyond its life. It's not even serviceable, so we have to come in and completely replace it. I think they had to reset it 3 times during his ceremony.
Alderman Warren.
Thank you. So I see we have 3 different categories of employees here: non-bargaining, ASME, and police. Is that fair to say?
The non-bargaining are like the police, are the sergeants and above.
Do you know how many there are?
You've got, 6 sergeants and 3 lieutenants, yourself. And then
Yes.
doesn't account for the deputy chief position, which is empty right now.
Okay.
And then, I don't know, you have a couple others on the non-officer side, don't you, part-timers?
We have one part-time evidence officer.
The evidence officer, which is a retired police officer, he's non-union as well. Ask me, are your dispatchers, all your records clerks back there?
How many dispatchers did you say we had? I know you said we were short.
When we get up running, we have 3 per shift for 4 different shifts, so
Yeah,
12.
I thought it was higher than that.
It should be,
Yeah,
should,
about right.
three per shift, and so we have 4 shifts.
And we're down 1 right now. We have 11 right now.
Correct.
So somebody's working overtime every time.
Yes.
Well, not every time, but at least 1 shift is.
For the most part, we maintain 2 dispatchers in there at all times to cover that. Not every shift or rotation we have to cover overtime, but if somebody is scheduled time off, somebody's sick, something like that, we have to get somebody else in there.
Thank you.
For fire, police, and dispatchers, Matt's been through this with me. I do not allow them to cut the budgets in that area, because that's just setting us up for issues.
Manager Crowe, I just note, we talk about public education, looking at the pension, I'm gonna lump in police and jump to fire too, just for a second, but, looking at those combined, it looks like it's just a little bit more, just a little bit under 3.7 million, for those 2 for employer contributions. Just to put that in context, 1, we've already heard, that's all of our property taxes, all our personal property replacement tax, these new taxes that we put in for electricity and natural gas. That number alone is to help us, we're still about 48 million in the hole in
Right.
regards to our pensions, and just to put it into context, I think that 3.7 million just going to pensions in 1 year is more than all those other budgets that we've got in here, city council, mayor, finance, community development, streets, IT, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's more than all those combined. Just,
Maybe streets is just about 1.1 million, 1.2 million, so
yeah, it's pretty close.
It's pretty close.
Going on there. Just,
Yeah.
and that's not to, I mean, look, it's an obligation that we have. The Supreme Court said it's the obligation for all current and past employees, and you can't touch it. So, but when people are looking at what are we having to deal with, and what is a well-funded or well-staffed police and fire department look at, like, these are some of the additional things that come with it. And like I say, this is not an aspersion on either department, because it's an obligation that the city has to meet. I just want all the public to be aware that these are these obligations that are out there, and when we get concerned in regards to where our pension systems and how underfunded are we in regards to that, that's why. Because if we get like to those other communities that dropped below, like the 20% funding level, the response was massive tax increases, massive layoffs of police and fire, to balance the budgets, and we have to avoid that at all cost of getting into that situation.
So, Peoria had to lay off, they did it 2 combined. They increased their taxes by 17% and laid off 10 firefighters and 10 police officers.
And so when we're making these investments now, it's to try to avoid us slipping into those situations. But anyway, end of soapbox rant, but.
So, here's the remainder. As you can see, again, gasoline's a big expense for us. But we always have 5 cars out, and there's a 6th car if the sergeant's out. And unfortunately, that number's gonna start going up as we go to the SUVs. And believe it or not, at ICMA, I saw the first Prius police car.
NIU has those.
What's that?
NIU has had those for some campus police for a while. I did have a question. The officers, they're just refueling at gas stations. Is there particular ones they go to, or do they go to the county highway?
They actually go down to
City yards, okay.
city yards,
Great. Just wasn't sure about that.
except when the pump's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, police, so we're doing top to bottom review. We also need to look at how to make the SVU permanent. The impact that she has had is unmeasurable, and that's something we need to look at. We're looking at structural heart, and then the unknown out there. We haven't even gotten into financial negotiations in either the fire or police negotiations yet. We're still working on, so we don't even know what the impact of that to the budget.
Mr. Chair,
Mayor.
on the second bullet point, I think you meant SVU, instead of SU.
It's not corrected on the slide.
Is it up there?
It's
Okay.
on there, right?
So my question is on the latter part of that, is there more grant monies that we are applying for, and what does that look like for us?
We're allowed to apply for it one more time.
It's supposed to be announced sometime in November when the grant window opens.
So we'll work on it, but that's strictly, and they may only, my experience on the fire side is they typically will only give one more year beyond. But we're gonna ask for the full 3 years. But then we have to fund it, we'll need to fund it down.
So, if I just question, the SVU department, the one detective, that's solely, all that is coming from a grant?
That's
It's not a part of this budget at all?
That's correct.
Wow, okay, thank you.
And that grant's about 40, between us and Voices, it's about 457,000. Was the total grant over 3 years.
Over 3 years?
Over 3
And
years.
Voices is receiving,
Matt, do you remember what it was?
I don't need exact numbers, but they're also receiving benefits and portions of this?
They are.
Correct.
From, just from my experience with it, it's certainly, you've seen just a really positive effect on the community, so please make that an effort to keep that.
As soon as we announce it, we'll work with Region 1 and get the grant submitted, so.
Yes, Alderman Parker.
Question on the SVU, I totally agree, she does a great job. We're authorized 48, now she is 49 with
No,
the grant?
she
or she's
counts
part of that
towards,
48?
she's counting towards that 48.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Fire budget, this is your second largest, it accounts for about approximately 30%, 31%. We're seeing the same increase. We had a huge increase in pensions this last year. last 2 years with the retirement of 13 firefighters. The good news is the department's gotten much younger, so they're going to be contributing. And we've seen, because of that, our initial salaries have gone down. Now, we did experience a payout of one of our senior lieutenants just retired, and there were some additional funds that we had to pay him out. That was projected at the end of the year projections. But our overall cost, as you can see, is decreasing. We are seeing fire. They've had some injuries and some training. We have seen the overtime. We've blown through the overtime this year because of injuries and additional people leaving and having to send our guys through the firefighting training academy. We didn't have that issue when Rockford was open. And I don't know, Chief, if you got any cue when Rockford's going to stand their fire academy back up.
They actually have 2 openings for us in December of this year.
So, which is good. Again, fire pension contributions is 1.7 million. So, see an increase in fire pension, increase in education and travel, Rockford Fire Academy really, and then we're going to, this is a program that has the tactical EMT, our first 3 guys through, we'll have to send 3 more through. If you have an ERT team, they embed themselves with ERT and they actually have additional training. And we'll have to outfit them. That's a recommendation. That's a best practices coming forward. This is something that was developed out of the active shooters. So you can force the guys forward so they can provide treatment right in there. In the past, they used to have to wait, stand outside the line, wait until the police had cleared the area. This allows them to go in. Now, they can also carry weapons. I don't think Chief's going to have them carry weapons when they go through the tactical training. We'll have 6 total that are qualified to do that. But every time the ERT team is deployed, they'll be deployed with them. And this was worked in conjunction. It was something I endorsed and something that was worked in conjunction between the police and fire department. Second largest portion of the budget.
Alderman Meiseck.
Sure. Before we move off of fire, I just had a question. It was on the first page, fire budget. It was the workman's comp insurance. It looks as though it came down, and I guess that helped me understand where that's come down. You were talking about.
So that's due to good negotiations from our at Gallagher. That is not related to. It's because Gallagher is the largest person within the market, and they're able to negotiate. They negotiated our whole workman's comp contract lower.
Okay, thank you.
Building and code enforcement. This is your building inspector, code enforcement supervisor, your nuisance inspector. You have one AFSCME employee. Your nuisance inspector, if you're not aware, your nuisance inspector is a union position. We tried to negotiate that out of the last contract and was not successful. The other thing is we are contracting out our plumbing inspections and elevator inspections. We put $1,000 in the revenue for elevator because that was a guesstimate. We'll see what this year plays out since we don't have any basis for it. And then plumbing inspections, we found that it was much cheaper when we hired Ben a year ago, it was much easier and cheaper to hire a person that was certified, qualified building inspector, get him trained to do all the building inspectors, and then contract out for our plumbing inspections. It's actually worked out really well. The plumbing inspector comes out of what, Elgin? Yes. Yeah, and he comes down, we just have to give him a 2-day heads up, and he comes down. And we kind of bunch our contracts up because the plumbing inspector is required to be a certified plumber. And so the plumbers union has control over it, and he has to be licensed by the state. And so we were paying for that.
Chair?
Alderperson Bradshaw.
Thank you. If I'm looking at the right line item, is that the $300?
Yes.
And then the elevator inspections, I see $800 here. I thought you said it was 1,000?
No, revenue is 1,000.
Revenue's 1,000. Thank you.
Chair.
Alderman Boardman.
The question was, how many employees are in this department?
So this is a section under community development. So there are 3 here. So community development has, if you go back to the community development, it has Andrew, Director Zubkoff, and the intern is split 50-50 between us and Northern for cost. And I will tell you, she's worth every dime we're spending on her.
Great. And then there was 1 union employee here and 2 non,
That's
I got
correct.
that right?
The non-union are your building inspector and code enforcement supervisor. Your nuisance inspector is your union.
Has, if I go another question, has the transition to an electronic reporting for nuisances, how has that affected the workload for this department?
It really streamlines it, and it really legitimizes it too, because, you might as well have been the Stone Age before we got iWorks. We had EnerGov, but, a lot of the stuff wasn't entered into EnerGov. And before EnerGov, it really was the Stone Age, almost no records of code enforcement. So, this is very outward facing. We get a lot of feedback and correspondence with the public through iWorks, and it allows us to track everything we do with every property and when we're doing it. A year from now or 6 months from now, we know when we were at that property, what the issues were at a property last time we were there. It's work to add information into there, but it really makes things a lot better.
So the council's aware, when you guys report to me, so a constituent calls you, they report it to me, I send it down to code enforcement, and then they plug it into iWorks. So it would be almost easier if you give them, it would short circuit, if you tell them to load it into TextMyGov, because it's a text system, it'll be right, and it'll be loaded, and they can track it. When you send it to me, they can't track it, or they can track it personally and see where it's done. I mean, even to the point where we've had people come up and say, hey, I see the nuisance, and it's been closed out. And then we can go back and find out why it's because the warning was closed out. We now have a fine.
And if I could just add one thing, I love being a cheerleader for the department and everything that we're doing. Prior to iWorks, they basically worked with pen and paper, had no computers or printers in their trucks. So every time they were out doing inspections, they would have to come back to City Hall, print something out, go back to the property, very, very inefficient. Now they work remotely with their tablets and their printers in their truck, almost like you would see a police officer doing. So the guys are in the office for a very brief period of time at the beginning of the day, just print anything out maybe they'll need for the rest of the day, look stuff up on their computers, and then they're back for a brief period of time at the end of the day. So they're usually out by about 8:30, back at about 4 or 4:30. Other than that, they're out doing inspections all day.
And Andrew, so I tasked Andrew at the beginning, when we brought iWorks on, establish a performance measure. He worked with the guys, and they have a performance measure. They have to do 12 inspections a day per person, which is, we have doubled or tripled the amount of inspections we were doing.
With regards to the intern, that intern kind of in and of itself is a temporary position. You're looking to go to NIU again for
Well,
this?
so normally the interns out of NIU, they work as a 22-month process. What happened is they knew we wanted an intern, and because we have the fellow, they approached us and said, hey, we have a deal for you. We have a scholarship for interns, so you can bring on an intern, and we'll pay for half of it. I don't know if we'll get that again, but we'll look at, so, what Abigail has done is she has helped with both with the census, she's helped with the PDM, she's gotten our land bank. We now have the pilot program. Obviously, we're not moving around enough. The pilot, we have the program that is now being used as the example for all others on the abandoned properties. And so, and that was all, Abigail, it was a thing that I had been bugging Andrew since he's been here to get done, and she did that, so. IT department, all right. We're, just for council's own knowledge, for your knowledge, we're going to be presenting at the November COW our long-awaited financial software. So, so we're going to, and that'll be approved, but there is some hardware and software in here. You want to talk a little bit about your hardware and software? He comes up and I say, yeah, that sounds good as long as it's in the budget. So I'm going to let him talk about this.
I think there you saw a pretty big decrease in software. That's because this year we're going to get the financial software, so that'll come off. Hardware went up. I think the big ones were, we're going to replace the radios for Public Works. I think we've talked about that at council before, and then potentially like a salt monitoring, snowplow monitoring system are kind of your big items there for next year.
And one of the things that caused the replacement of the radios is, so if you don't know, the state law changed last year dealing with cell phones. And a lot of the communications has been dealt with. Cell phones, we have to actually, if people use cell phones, we have to reimburse them for their use of their cell phones. So one of the things we looked at was Dennis was doing all of his tasking for snow plowing and leaf pickup via cell phones. And we dug deep. Why was that going on? Well, we have old VHF radios that we can't communicate around the city. And so you've heard radios, this year we got the fire department replaced. Next year it's going to be the street department.
What accounts for the computer and network consulting increases?
Right here. Oops,
sorry.
Go back.
I think some of that was to run some fiber to some other buildings to expand out our network was a big part of that.
And what you won't see on here is the fiber and the SCADA that is going to water and sewer, because that falls under the water and sewer department when we go through water and sewer bills will, their budget, which we are not touching, because that's enterprise budget, so.
This is
Chair.
a two-employee department.
Two-employee department, yeah.
Alderman Meisak.
So curiosity, you mentioned the tracking of plow trucks and so forth. So is that hardware related?
It's going to be both. It's using GIS network and be able to track them. What we found last year is particularly with leaf pickup. I'm gonna tell the story here. So I'm standing out. We kept getting complaints about these 2 one-block streets, and so I finally went out there myself, and his guys had reported that they had completed it, and so I went out there and said, Dennis, I'm standing in front of it, and there are 2 5-foot piles on this street, and he said, sure enough. So what we did was we came back and got with Kurt, said, all right, there is software out there that we can track and report. We're already doing it with the maps, saying this is where we're getting, but we can actually track where we're doing it. And other communities have gone as far as track in real time when you're plowing your streets. So it's up on the map. You can say, here's where my plow is, and this is when my street's going to be cleared. And it's all based upon GIS, which we now have 2 people that are, the old IT department only had 1 GIS. Kurt, now Eric and Kurt are both GIS certified.
So you're gonna be able to do that with ours, with what you're talking about here?
That's the goal. All right, so that's the goal you guys have been working on. And the other thing is Dennis wants every one of his plow drivers to have a notebook or a tablet, so that if he has a driver out, they can look at where the route's gonna go and what they have to do. That's what, right? Because that's where we get into problems. If you have a driver that doesn't come in or is sick, then they're relearning the routes. TIF and pensions. This is just the overview slide. So downtown TIF, the big expense in the downtown TIF is the payback on the revolving loan. We actually have our second application of the revolving loan. It's going through the process right now with the CDC. So we'll see how that plays out. They met with Andrew, and Andrea and told them that they needed to start with the Greater Freeport Partnership.
Manager Crowe, can you go back one slide there?
Sure.
We got pensions underneath that, right?
Yep.
Okay. And with the headers, I think as you told us when we asked,
Right.
that, far left is projected revenue from a past year, projected expenses, and then
Right.
budgeted, and then the third one is budgeted revenue, budgeted expenses,
And
and then the difference.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the difference is you'll see it's going in positive. That's from the additional contributions based upon a return of 6 what is it, Randy? I can't. 6.%
6.2.
return based upon our additional revenue so we're actually going to be taking in this next year between our contributions and the employee contributions more than we're paying out. So we're going to finally start recovering some of those pension funds.
Okay, so column 3 there, that ends in the 7,962,137. That is the city contributions, employee contributions, plus using the anticipated market return that the actuaries use.
Right, that's correct.
And if we meet all of those, and with our expenses, we'd be able to make, about $1.5 million progress towards our $48 million unfunded liability.
That's correct.
If we meet those targets.
If we meet those targets.
Obviously, a bad market year, we're gonna lose some ground. If we have a better than a 6 and, the percentage with actuaries, we do increase more ground.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, going back down to downtown TIF. Any questions on this?
You had said that this is the second application for the revolving loan. Did the first one go through, or?
That was Wagner House, which, so. This one is a little bit shakier, so we want to make sure they go through the whole process. So.
And would it be a repayable one in this?
That was one of the discussions that they're meeting with whether it's what type. We've asked the CDC and the Greater Freeport Partnership to come back to us with a proposal.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see how it plays out, because when we asked the person for his financials, he kind of took a big gulp. Lamb Road TIF is the TIF that we have actually money in our budget, money in the accounts. So what we're doing is, if you look at site improvement, that's dealing with the money that is going to TriStar right now to move their headquarters here. And as well as, who else are we paying out, Randy?
Right now, under site improvement, we have 2 programs going with TriStar, and that's strictly TriStar.
So we paid off the debt for Sega. For this, professional services, that is, we are paying for a portion of the comp plan out of this, as well as the Greater Freeport Partnership.
Manager Crowe, is this the last year that, before Menards and Walmart?
Yes, it is.
And this, with these TIFs, this is one that you can use it for contiguous TIFs also as well. We're gonna have substantial funds, it looks like, in these TIFs. Are we gonna be looking over the next year in regards to between infrastructure, site improvements, things of that nature, as to how we can maybe best utilize those additional resources? Okay.
We don't want to do anything along that lines until we make sure Menards and Walmart are paid off.
Yeah.
West Avenue TIF, you've seen an increase in this. This is because of the JJ Venture properties. And I will tell you, JJ got a very sweet deal from the city, didn't he? Andrew? We're paying him 90% of his tax increase, his increment. So almost all of this is being paid out to him. His site improvement, that whole $37,000 is going to him. Now, what was interesting is we did have an agreement with and JJ Ventures, for those that don't know.
Excuse me. JJ's not being paid out of this one.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
He's out of Meadows, I believe.
Meadows, okay. So I'm jumped ahead, all right. So West Avenue TIF. All right. Site improvement is going to,
To be determined.
okay.
That was the leftover money that we had after paying everything else off.
And we were, thank you for correcting me.
Alderman Borderman.
Just quickly, where is the West Avenue TIF located? Obviously on West Avenue, but where?
I'll turn my TIF expert.
So the West Avenue TIF, it's over by Shopco. It doesn't include Farm and Fleet, but it's the area around that. You might, you hadn't been here yet, but last year an RDA was approved with Frank's Car Wash. That area is in the West Avenue TIF. So there, as it would imply, along West Avenue, but in that area more specifically.
But he never, while we approved it, he never executed it.
Chair.
Alderperson Bradshaw.
Is West Avenue, TIF, does that include the CVS Pharmacy shopping mall area?
That intersection is covered by one of the TIFs. What specific parcel, you know, that, or what TIF that specific parcel is, I don't have that information off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Because there's a little bit of kind of overlay between, well, not overlay, but the West Avenue and the Meadows are contiguous, which means, you know, we could move money back and forth, but they're really right next to each other around that intersection. So I don't recall which one exactly that parcel is in.
Thank you.
And the Burchard TIF, I mean, this is our least performing TIF. And then Meadows, we talked about JJ Ventures, so you'll see financing costs. The increase in property taxes are due to him, but that financial cost and site improvement, financial cost is all going to JJ Ventures. And that's the Aspen, Dental, the Starbucks, the Joanne Fabrics. I think, is there anything else? Shoe Sensation is?
Family Dollar and US Cellular are in there also.
Okay. So that's all.
Sherwin-Williams.
All right, police pensions, we've kind of talked this around, but so statutory minimum is what we have to do. Sorry, I touched the screen. Is what we have to do to meet the 90%. The Lottbacher and Amond is based upon the requirement to meet 100% by 2040. As you can see, we're falling in between those two. So, fire pensions, again, we are falling between the two.
Alderman Bourne.
This is probably a topic for another day. It's late in the evening, and I'm not trying to delay this anymore, but where do we stand on the options for pension obligation bonds? I know there was a presentation on that. Have we followed up on that, or has it been presented again?
They have come back to us because the bond market's down. What we were waiting for was to see what's going to happen, or what the proposal was coming out of the pension task force. The way that the proposal is that we'll go into a general fund, will be managed, but we will still be responsible for our liability. So then we'll have to make a decision at that point, if it gets approved, how we want to fund those going forward. If we want to go out and bond it. The issue is, and I'll warn you, the issue is on the bonds. It'll take care of the liability, but we still have our contribution that goes forward. So there is an additional cost that we would have to come up with someplace in that.
You're talking the actual cost, which is what, in between 1.2 to 1.3 million a year, give or take, right
Yep.
now.
Between the two bonds,
Right.
between the two
It would
funds.
eliminate our 48 million unfunded liability, but every year, in addition to repaying the bond, pay interest, but we'd have to make sure we're doing the 1.2.
Right.
Yeah, it's called the normal cost of operating.
What I recall, our fear was that if we had gone ahead and done the pension obligation bond without knowing what the General Assembly was going to do, and then they came in and lumped all the municipalities together without giving consideration from them, we could have been hurting ourselves. But as you indicated, the current proposal is, while it's all lumped together, each municipality is going to have their own separate account. So
Right.
you get credit for what you have or haven't done in the past.
Right, and the savings is then to the communities, because Lautenbacher, just to give you an example, Lautenbacher Naaman manages 352 of the accounts, including ours. They're also the actuary for 400 of the accounts. So that's a savings. We would not have to be paying the actuary anymore we wouldn't have to be paying Lautenbacher Naaman to manage our accounts. And the same thing with the investment firms. There are about 4 investment firms across the state that would come under one. So
That's what's proposed.
that's what's proposed. So, but we would have to have our own liability under it. And we'll, if it gets approved, we'll readdress it and reengage with Spear Financial. There have been some communities that did it. Rockford did it. They took a portion of their liability. But we need to understand what the whole cost is. So this is a library revenue, and if Ashley wants to. Sorry, do my hair. Yeah, here you go.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, sorry, I'm short. I cause problems. So this is the library revenue. It looks generally the same as everybody else's. We have our per capita grant, which is through the state. Replacement tax is 0 because all of it goes to pensions, but I will note that when there is extra, we do get some. So the last full fiscal, we got just over 13,000 for that. We do have some money in investment accounts, so you'll see an interest line for the amount of interest that we get for that. Any more questions about revenue? Or any questions about revenue?
Director?
Yes,
Yes,
sorry.
so it looks like you're projecting for your property taxes to leave it flat other than the EAV increase that we talked about previously?
Yes, I was instructed to leave it flat. We are already at the maximum amount. We're restricted to different percentage increases.
Okay.
So I left it at the same amount per Director of Finance's, Director Bukas's recommendation. He's not looking at me.
I heard my name.
Chair.
Alderman Burberry.
Director, gifts and bequests come in periodically. Are those used for operations?
We
They go into the
have-
foundation, or they as specified by the donor?
Yep, so we have a foundation, and we do get donations as well. Sometimes the donations and bequests are restricted. Most of the time, they are not. And any of our incoming revenue that we receive from our foundation is in that line, the miscellaneous, the gifts and bequests, and miscellaneous grants, miscellaneous local sources. We try to place it in those as revenue.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair.
Alderperson Bradshaw.
Thank you. Director Huffines, I was looking at your last line item, fund balance reserve transfers, 20,000 in 2019, and to make up, is it a deficit? You're taking 65,000 and putting in the budget?
This I'm gonna turn over to Director Bukas, but I think this is all to deal with some of our FICA funds. Am I correct?
No.
No.
They are running a deficit. Because they're shortened fiscal year this year, they're not running as big a deficit because they have the library really basically relies on the property tax. Without the property tax, they can't operate. And so they do have some reserve funds that have not been used in years past, and so we're bringing them forward to use it this time. There is some funds in the FICA Medicare account for the library that's restricted for only those uses. But at this time, we're not looking at bringing them forward. We were looking at bringing them forward in the current fiscal year, but not the next fiscal year, in 2020.
Follow-up?
Go ahead.
So some of these funds, are they coming perhaps from the investments that are earning interest?
Well, we have, short answer, yes.
I was summarizing. Thank you.
I've kind of been asking every department this. How many employees are,
We have 15 total.
and can you break that down? How many are non-bargaining and are union?
I should have taken my note here. Hold on.
While she's figuring that out. So they are actually, the bargaining are in our ASME union. So when we are negotiating, they're included in the contract. The one difference with the library is all of their part-timers are part of the ASME union.
We have 6 employees that are non-bargaining, off the top of my head.
And 11 that are. I've got it.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's,
You're welcome.
I guess one more question. I noticed that you don't have anything budgeted under grants for this year. Is there a
We are constantly doing grants, but it's really hard for me to know what grants we're actually getting awarded. So I didn't want to put money in there as like I'm budgeting as my working budget. I left it at 0, so it's just extra money if we do get grants.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Director, and also maybe Director Beefus, without getting into the specifics, using that amount of reserves in this year, is there flexibility for emergencies throughout this year with additional reserves if needed?
Yes.
Okay.
However, I would really like to not be using $65,000 a year to just run our budget.
Understood. I'm just looking at for a snapshot of this year versus where does it stand with the balance as a whole? Go ahead.
Manager Crow, maybe you, or Director Zupkoff or Director, when it comes to grants, obviously it's a lot of work, time consuming. Are Region 1 Blackhawk Hills, are they able to help us with these?
So Blackhawk Hills, we get no support from. It's all coming from Region 1. And Dana, what Dana does is she goes through the grants as they come through and then say, hey, I think you guys fall into this, you guys fall into this. But we additionally have grants that we come up with, like an example was, we didn't get it, but last year we submitted a grant for the census, and we pointed that out to her, and she helped do that. And what she does is they get a service fee for help writing the grant based upon the number of hours, and then administrative fee. And we'll do the same thing with the fire and police grants. However, we do have, each fire, police, community development, all have people that have been through the school for management of the grants.
In the library, we have 3 full-time librarians, so there's 2 besides me, and the 3 of us basically push out all grants that the library does, on top of everything else we do.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm confused as to how we benefit being under Blackhawk Hills when it comes to the output that we're getting from there as opposed to other options, but I understand it's for a different discussion and it's not under our control, but.
That's right, it's really under the county's control, who we're with. We're an associate member with Region.
I just felt like it needed to be said.
Any more revenue questions? Okay, and here are the expenses. I'm just gonna let you ask me questions.
Director, is it accurate that it looks like there's more of a focus on digital and non-print services than I'd say traditional print services? And is that intentional? Is kind of how the library is looking to move forward?
Well, we kind of separate our collection into several different lines of the budget. And there are more lines of the budget that are based off of digital resources, technological resources, than there are the traditional print. So yes, you are correct. we are not stepping away from print by any means. People come in and check out print all of the time. So we're just making sure that we're being the most resourceful and bringing the library up into modern times.
And is that kind of what you see with your colleagues around the area, around the state?
Absolutely. Yeah. You guys are making it easy on me. But.
The one thing I'll add, she probably has the most difficult in preparation of her budget, because she has to get it through Randy and I, and then she has to go back, get it through her board, and then back through you guys, where everybody else is just a two-step process.
Chair.
Alderperson Brescia.
Thank you. Director Huffines, I realize the cafe has just been up and running recently. I noticed that line item 610, the last three numbers, cafe supplies. Why is there a line item for $3,600?
That is the rental income that we take in. So if there's any maintenance that we're incurring, we're going to take it out of that line. So we do own some of the equipment that's in the cafe. The library does. For example, we need to repair the ice machine. Like, it works fine, but it's outputting too much water. So that would get expensed to that line when we did that maintenance versus doing it under the main maintenance of all the other stuff that the library does.
One follow-up.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Does the library absorb the utility costs for the cafe?
Yes.
So that's just part of the rental fee?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the grants, we've talked throughout them. The DOPE grant is our Pretzel City Transit. The big thing here is to understand that we're running a $70,000 deficit in that grant. The DECO grants, it looks like we're running a deficit, but that's because we got money in this fiscal year for the grant for next year. We were able to get 25%. That is the grants to go after the abandoned properties, not the tax trustee, but abandoned properties east of the Pecatonica that we have been. So,
Manager Crow?
Yep.
I think I missed it earlier. Could you give the headings for these, what these columns represent?
Yep. So the first one is fiscal year 19 revenue, fiscal year 19 expense, 20 revenue, 20 expense, and then difference.
Thanks.
What accounts for the DOPE difference there?
Well, when this grant was originally written, it was written to get money from Burner. It was originally written to get, and we've tried, this last year, we tried to get people to pay for the rides to Burner. What we found is the ride no one's paying to go to Burner. They're finding other ways to get there. So we're gonna have to figure out a way to get this back profitable. And I know one of the taskers coming out of the strategic plan is to look at transportation across the city. And this is one of the, we'll do a transportation study. So we'll be carefully looking at this.
Chair.
Alderperson Brescia.
Thank you. Manager Crowe, I do apologize. It's hard to read this when don't have the headings on there. How can the grants operate at a deficit on here? You say that's the difference, the last line item?
So the only one that is operating in a deficit is the DOPE grant. The other ones that are running in a deficit is because we were able to get 25% of the grant for DECO for the purchasing of properties purchasing and demoing of properties. All right, strictly demoing, excuse me, they're not purchasing, because the IDNR grant's for purchasing. The DECO grant for demoing properties east of the Pecatonica we were able to get, we had 2 grants, one for one for 100,000, one for 200,000. And that money, we were able to get up to 25% of that money ahead of time. So because the way that it's expended, we cannot, we received it this year, but it has to be expended by the end of July.
End of June.
End of June. So that's counted as a deficit in next year's grant money, because we won't get that reimbursed until next year.
Okay, I get it now. Thank you.
So the DOJ grant, you can see what that's running. And we get the money for both us and Voices. And they actually submit the paperwork for us. The one thing that is not on here is well, it is on here, excuse me, is the first expenditure of the pre-disaster mitigation grant. We have 3 years. If we get that, we have 3 years to expend that money. Street improvements, we talked about this. This is the combination of the grant, the bond money that we went out, the gas and electric tax, and the road fees. The road fees were set up to pay for the bond, so we get more money in here. We'll get a better feel for and then we'll go out and do another bonding issue based upon the revenue we're getting from this. I will tell you, between the work we were doing and this money, we basically stretched the contractors we had into the area to the limit. And these are very small 1 and 2 line items. The big thing to do is health and environmental. We'll talk about that here on my next slide. We are running a $22,000 deficit in health and environmental. And so you know what that is. That's garbage and recycling. And the transfer station.
Yeah, and the administrative fees that we intentionally said we're going to eat a portion of.
That's correct.
What's the difference between the revenue and expenses on the MFT there? Top line?
Well, we have not, so the revenue, we'll have 500, oh, sorry. I can't touch the screen. Well, that's our estimated revenue based upon the new money we've got coming in. But we're gonna go out, again, use the MFT money. Some of that we've got to build up in preparations for Adams, and also the Detmer Bridge work as we go forward.
Okay.
Because that's all paid out of MFT. Summary. So public safety is looking at structure of theirs. That's, when I talk public safety, that's public works, fire, and police. Looking at communications individual, that's one of the things we talked about. Strategic plan, we owe you some answers back there. The other thing that we are tasked to do, that individual will do, is draft a strategic communications plan. Increase tree removal, increase in MFT. And one of the things that I talked to the department heads, and this is coming from, I went through 3 strategic planning sessions at various points, is try any changes to the budget they have, sorry, I'm losing my voice totally. Any changes to the budget that have to be going forward, they have to justify that in touching an element within the strategic plan. So they can make a proposal to the change of the budget if it falls under the strategic plan. The other thing you're going to see coming forward, a change, is every ordinance and every resolution will be tied back to a strategic objective. So you know where it's falling in meeting your strategic objective. That is your policy document. That's what drives it. If it doesn't tie back on it, the goal, we will not be bringing it to you guys. That was the driving factor. And that's a recommendation. That's high-performing communities are doing that. The other thing is that's going to be changing is the performance measures that the department heads are going to put out will be a basis for their evaluations. And their ability to meet the strategic plan. So, and so they get a clear idea, and we'll once they get their performance measures, we'll sit down and establish what their goals are. So we talked about running a $22,000 deficit in garbage collection, and that was done on purpose. We knew that.
Any other comments or questions?
That's the general budget.
And so we've got a finance cow set for 5 o'clock next Monday.
That's next Monday. We going through water and sewer. I'm going to have the slides teed up to, we're making some changes in the capital budget, the initial proposal, based upon some things that we've had dealing with SCADA. And so one of the things we have to do is we found out that our Neptune system is no longer supported as of 1 January, right, of next year. So we have to add that into the capital budget and in the water and sewer budget as we go forward as the replacement of our Neptune system.
Anything else in the budget discussion for tonight?
No,
Hearing
thank
nothing.
you.
The next portion is public comments. Are there any public comments? Tommy?
I want to thank Matt Summer, find that he's doing a good job at the police department. And I want to know, Joey, how's that Land Road building over there by Land Road?
What do you want to know, Tommy?
About that building they building over there by
Well, there's a company that's putting on an addition.
Oh, they're not going to be done for a while, huh?
I don't know what their projected date is.
Not sure when TriStar's going to be done. They're building both a new processing facility as well as a headquarters building.
Any further public comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Moved. Second.
All right, Busker and Burberry for the first and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.